Hello Marvelous fans, my name is Rob and welcome back to another Marvelous video. If you are a Spider-Man fan, then the show that you have to check out this year is Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man on Disney+. This interesting reimagining of a classic fan-favorite Marvel superhero deserves all the love and rightfully so. The first episode raised the bar really high and somehow the second episode managed to cross that and set the curve even higher. So, without much further ado, let's get down to the ending explained of the second episode of the show. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
I'm offering you an exclusive internship, Peter.
How lucky is the Parker's luck? The first episode ended with Norman Osborn and Peter meeting for the first time. The second episode picks up from that and turns out that Norman is here to offer Peter an exclusive internship at the Oscorp's internship program. Apparently, they have been looking into the neighboring schools for talented students, and that's how they came across Peter's academic performance. Impressed by his work, Osborn personally chose Peter to be a part of the internship program. Peter and Aunt May excitedly learn about the basics of the internship, and Norman's promise of it being a paid internship while remaining strictly extracurricular in nature gets them all hyped. The next morning, Peter went to his school all happy and came across Lonnie and his friends hyping themselves up for the big game tonight. Peter tells Lonnie about his internship at Oscorp's, and surprisingly, Lonnie does not berate him one bit. Instead, he pulls Peter in and celebrates that victory with him, which is, such a heartwarming thing to watch. The celebration, however, gets cut short when their teacher shows up to cut down the ruckus. Later in the day, Peter tells Nico about his new opportunity. While Nico is very happy and very proud of Peter for getting this opportunity, her comment about Norman Osborn is also quite right. She points out that there is no way this man reached the pinnacle of success without being a little shady in the back. Peter tries to brush it off, and luckily, before things can get any tense between the two, Pearl intervenes. Pearl overheard the conversation and showed up to congratulate Peter. Using Pearl as a distraction, Peter leaves the game and rushes to the Oscorp Industries building. He manages to reach there within 2 minutes to spare and gets a ridiculous ID picture taken before being guided into the internship section. Even though Norman Osborn told him that Peter should come to visit him directly at the office, after entering the premises, no one believes Peter one bit. In the internship area, he meets his colleagues or, competitors, Asha from Wakanda, Amadeus Cho, and Jeanne Foucault. While Asha is kind of rather hopeful, Amadeus sees the whole thing as a competition and uses every opportunity he can find to gloat about himself. Jeanne, on the other hand, is a bit closed off but not unfriendly. As the four interns meet and greet each other, the head of the internship program enters the room. It is Dr. Bentley Whitman. He's a cranky old scientist who does not think his talent should be wasted on training interns, and, he makes that pretty obvious. He's sarcastic, mean, and extremely loud. Although it seems funny witnessing him on the screen, I know for a fact that if I was an intern there, I would be so pissed working under him. Luckily, soon enough, all four interns are sent to more specified programs. The entire time, Peter wanted to end up in the robotics wing of the Oscorp, but was bagged by Cho. Instead, he joined the sustainable energy program led by Dr. Carla Connors. Together, they worked on creating a self-sustaining battery. When you love your work, time flies by, and, sure enough, Peter and Dr. Connors work for hours. They decide to take a 15-minute break when Peter gets a call from Nico. Turns out, Rockford T. Bales ended up winning the match, so now Nico was invited to a party. Peter promised her that he would show up before hanging up. With still a few minutes to spare, Peter goes and sees the other three interns who are hanging out in the lounge area. There, Jean turns on the TV so as not to give Amadeus an opportunity to gloat about his excellence again. While flipping the channel to find something decent to watch, they came across the news channel that talked about an arsonist in action on 51st Street. After making excuses that are lame, that also made him look like a wannabe arsonist, Peter excused himself from the bunch and suited up in the stairwell of Oscorp Industries before swinging his way to the burning building. Turns out, the pyromaniac Butane was planning on burning the house on 50th Street, not the 51st. But when has calling out an idiot with a flamethrower worked out so well? So, of course, now, Peter and Butane got into a fiery, quite literally, fight. Eventually, Peter manages to take Butane out of the high-rise building to a pet store, while doing his best to ensure none of the animals lose their lives to this arsonist. Peter manages to knock out Butane with pounds of kibble and a tank full of water. However, by the time his hero wing is done, Peter realizes he is well over the break time. By the time he rushed back, Dr. Whitman had already started grilling Dr. Connors about Peter's whereabouts. Dr. Connors tries to cover for Peter, but Peter spills the bean with his lame excuse again. Soon after, the security guard who took Peter's photo ID shows up there and calls on him as Mr. Osborn wishes to see him. Peter does his walk of shame to Mr. Osborn's office while all of his competitors remark his failing future. However, what they don't know is that Peter is about to get an opportunity of a lifetime. Remember how he changed in the stairwell? Well, there was a camera there. And now, Mr. Norman Osborn knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So, as you can guess, with this revelation, we are about to get some interesting character dynamics, to say the least. While the episode ends here, the plot lines introduced in this episode are far too spread out not to talk about. So, let's get to it.
It'll be even easier if you drop the wannabe hero act and scram!
The first villain of the show, who is Butane? In the 64th issue of Excalibur, released in 1993, we were introduced to Butane for the first time. His real name is unknown, and from the first time we see him, we knew he isn't up to any good. He was one of those unfortunate souls who were transformed by Jasper's warp. Butane turned into this metallic purple man with flames around his eyes and head. He can project flame outward, much like the Human Torch. He can also fly using the flames, just like Johnny does. However, in the comics, we see him get tracked down by the Resources Control Executive known as RCX. Although it was implied that the tracking down was happening for his own good, the reality was far more brutal. The head of the RCX, Nigel Orpington Smythe, wanted to get all of the Warpies, the people who were transformed by the warp, and use them to create a superhuman army. Later, Captain Britain managed to depower all the Warpies using the Sword of Might, leaving Butane pretty powerless. However, that is not the version of Butane we see in this episode. From what we can see, this Butane is a regular guy who just really likes power. While he does not seem very smart, I would not put it past him to be able to design the suit we see him flaunting. Imagine metallurgy gear, but make it chic and very tech-oriented. He has twin flamethrowers on his hand that probably use a fuel supply that is hidden under that thick coat he seems to be wearing. With almost little to no spark, he's able to light up the twin flamethrowers in a jiffy and, shoot out flames in whatever direction he so wishes. Even though Spidey sprays him down with the fire extinguisher, it's not enough to screw up the mechanics of the flamethrowers he's using. The only way Spidey managed to win this fight was by toppling the huge aquarium on top of Butane, pinning him down and soaking his equipment thoroughly, preventing reignition. While this is our first meeting with Mr. Butane, I doubt this will be our last. This man seems like the kind to hold a grudge against a teenager.
In your case, we'll be focusing on trying to create a new self-sustaining battery.
Sneak peek of the classic villain. I was not expecting it. I will be honest, but I am so happy to have seen Dr. Connors. I think, as fans, we usually associate the Lizard with being a man. However, Carla Connors seems like the perfect person to be the Lizard. She already has an amputation, and she's doing research in the field of sustainable energy. It makes 100% sense for her to, shift her gears and take the villain route. Although I would be decently impressed if instead of painting her as the villain, Jeff Tremel instead made her someone who is more sympathetic. I mean, that would not be difficult because I inherently sympathize with Dr. Kurt Connors, but you get what I mean. I'm definitely curious to see how the dynamics would play out between our young superhero and his mentor/villain. Since we are on the topic as well,
So,
what will happen to Peter now that Norman knows? Well, honestly, my guess is going to be that Norman will be using this against Peter in any way, shape, or form. While he is fatherly and Peter desperately looks for a father figure, I do not believe that Norman can ever have anything good in his heart. I think he would offer Peter a partnership, saying he would help Peter become a better superhero while also using Peter for his own gains. Eventually, Peter would realize that he's becoming someone who he really isn't, and then that would lead to the age-old Green Goblin versus Spider-Man dynamic that you and I are so accustomed to. the Parker luck has to run out. I'm not saying that I want Peter to be unlucky at all. However, I can already see the cracks forming. Because of the Oscorp internship and Butane's fiasco, Peter was unable to show up for Nico at the party. Missing the party will, down the line, have greater consequences. Because, Nico is already disappointed with Peter and is flaking on her. Later, as Peter and Norman start working together more and more, Nico would probably be the first person to distance herself from Peter and clock in on the fact that Peter is being different. While I don't think Lonnie or Peter would play this big of a role in Peter Parker returning to his senses after being tempted by Norman, I do think they will be the catalysts that are necessary for Peter's maturity and realizing what heroism truly is. While we do not get to see Harry Osborn in this episode, we did see 3 new characters, and I am interested to see what bigger roles they play in the story. We have seen Jeanne before. She is, after all, finesse, the one person who can do whatever you can do, just better. In the comics, she was born with the ability to master anything, any skill actually, very quickly. Using that skill of hers, her parents used her to get status, acclaim, and money. She knew that they were being shady, and she suspected that her real father was the Taskmaster, but she had no proof. She ended up at the Avengers Academy after graduating from MIT at the age of 14 and becoming an Olympic athlete. Norman Osborn tortured the others, but for finesse, he just had to give her the opportunity to learn new things. I am curious if this Jeanne will be following the same route that her comic book counterpart was on. Amadeus, even though he comes off as cocky and gloating, is, actually a good guy. Or so does the comic book counterpart says. Amadeus Cho ended up following Bruce Banner's footsteps in the comics using an array of nanobots. This Amadeus Cho does not seem like the kind who would not create nanobots from scratch to harness the powers of gamma energy. So, let's be real. Peter's life is about to get really tough, really soon. Marvelous verdict. Animated TV shows are definitely entertaining, but it has been a while since I saw a show that is entertaining as this one. All the characters are introduced at a steady pace, and the character dynamics are being established in the most fun way possible. So now, that just leaves one question for all of us to answer. How will Peter manage to save the day when a new villain shows up knocking on his door? Well, to find that out, you have to tune in next week for the 3rd episode. Let us know in the comments what you guys think about the 2nd episode, though. Your favorite moment, and what you think Norman has in store for Peter. Now, I will see you guys in the next Marvelous video. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone.